life documentary of Marisa Piccarelli,
Yeah.
and we're going to start with some questions here of your earliest memories. So, what
Hmm.
are some of the things that you remember most about her at an early age?
Oh, well, that's way long time ago. Remember is kind of hard, but I can tell you what I was told from my mother and father. That because when I was born, my dad was 40 years old. Was 40 years old because he could not get married before because he was a career of a carabiniere. It's a rank of the Royal Army in Italy. That for 20 years when you sign up you could not get married. My dad was 19 and did not realize what it meant. He realized later on hard was for him because he was a good looking man and he would see so many girls, and you cannot get to know them for the reason that he could not get married until he was 40. A matter of fact, if he would find a girlfriend, he had a girlfriend, and the superior find out, they would transfer him to another town. So he had to wait really until, well, he met my mother. I want to tell you the story about my mother. He was about 6 months before he finished his army service. A matter of fact, by the time he was Maresciallo Maggiore dei Carabinieri, he was like the head chief police would be in the town. My mom was in Switzerland traveling with a priest and a doctor. She had gone to Switzerland. And in the train, all of a sudden, this man in uniform, of which was my dad, went up to her and said, Signorina, may I see your passport? So my mother giving the passport to him. He got the passport and he went in another room. He came back and gave my mother the passport back. My mother thought of nothing. Then when my mother went into the bus to go, when they got off the train and my mother went to the bus to go to the hometown, all of a sudden she looked at the window. She see this Maresciallo, which would have been my father later on, throwing a kiss to her. And she says, oh my God, what does that mean? Well, after a week, a letter arrived home to my mother's place. She used to live with her mother, so it would have been my grandmother. My grandmother opened the letter because at those days the mother always opened up children letter. And when my grandmother saw that, she told my mother, who's this person? My mother didn't know. So, because he said, Signorina, I saw you, your eyes, he described my mother. He was very romantic, my dad. So my grandmother, I don't even know if she kind of scolded or maybe even spanked my mother. Then later on, my father came, like he was like to the family, but the boy of the town, they liked my dad, and like they were making it hard for him. But anyhow, they got married. So when they got married, they went on the honeymoon to Livorno. They loved Livorno so much, they established a home. And my dad found a job in Livorno, which he worked another 25 years because he was only 40. And I was born in Livorno. And my dad was so excited when he had children because of me and then my sister came along. The people say, in those days, you don't see many fathers walking around the street to bring the little girl. She says they would see this man with this little girl all dressed up with beautiful dress, all embroidered. And they would say, look at the man. I mean, everybody would talk because in Italy, people, they like to admire things. Beautiful things are admired. Bad things they might see one time and they say, come brutto, ugly, this. They never talk about it no more. But beautiful things, especially to see a man with a child, and I was blonde with all curly hair. Like I says, and then my father would have been proud even if you were ugly because, to a mother, all our children are beautiful. But my children being already beautiful, so they're really extra beautiful. Okay, the
Okay.
next one.
So, what was life like in Livorno before the war?
It was good life. I remember, like I say, my mom had a housekeeper in those days, okay? Now you tell me she needed a housekeeper with 2 children, okay? She needed a housekeeper. I remember this lady, she used to give us a bath and clean the house because there was always, some people that was in need of something, and more than one they had. There was one who would take us for a walk later on. We were pretty good. And what's the question again?
Life in Livorno.
Oh, it was good. I remember a couple of times we went to the opera, and we went to the opera with a long dress, and there was outside the carrozza. The carrozza has like a carriage and a horse, you know, because the opera, when you went to the opera in those days, was as if you were going to see the Queen of England. Like the people really put up the party, you know. And in Toscana, people are into opera because there's Puccini, there's more than one that goes in, that have written opera. They're very into opera. There are a lot of people in Italy, they're called Tosca, Alfredo. They pick name from opera. So it was really a good life. I remember every time we went in our house, we had first, second, and third. Always fruit, you know, when we ate. Tablecloth. Because in those days, a lot of people, maybe they could afford food, yeah, but not the 3 meals a day, you know. Thank God I wasn't that plump because I never had much appetite, okay? But otherwise, I could have been real plump at an old age.
Gotcha. Do you remember anything with Mussolini when they started invading, and what did they tell the people?
I'll tell you. Of important people, the first time I saw was il re Vittorio Emanuele that passed by on the train. And you know, I'm even ashamed to say, he couldn't even reach the window. He was 4 feet 10 tall, you know, and I saw him. But he had such a high rank of possibility. That's the first one I saw, Vittorio Emanuele. Then, as far as I remember, Mussolini was his voice. That was so strong and potent, it still ring in my ear. It was 5 o'clock at night, June the 10th. I remember, and everybody, they were talking about the war is going to start, the war, you know. So the lady was already crying before I did the speech. I remember my mother, all the ladies were around the radio, and in the people's home, the radio was loud, you know. I remember I ran down in the garden. I always ran there when I was afraid. And there was a tree with a bark like this. And I remember I would hang on the bark and swing, you know. And I remember I was singing, I would hear the voice, but I didn't really know the meaning of a war, really, or the danger. I just remember that people was crying, you know. And then when my mother came, she says, "Oh, Marisa, the war started." Oh, they were crying, you know. I had fear, see, but up to now, I didn't know nothing yet. We were in war, not with the United States. We were in war with France, okay? So this was the 10th of June. The 22nd of June was on a Sunday. My mom went to church because my mother, she always went to church at 6 o'clock in the morning because, you know, she was very religious. All our school were private school, Catholic school. All is the influence of the Catholic we had to go. And you can see, I'm glad because this is the result you see me now, okay? I've been married 59 years. Like I says, I still obey the church because I'm happy, or otherwise, quote, you know, I used to say quote, I don't know. And so let's go back to the war and be sad. So, but when you're a child, it's a different perspective you see. I was 9 years old and my sister was 7. But see, in Italy, it was safe in those days because we live in the south. Right next, there was the family. They would come in our house and take care of our house, like the maid. I hate to call her a maid, but like she would come and help my mother. So she know whenever my mom went to church, she was already up working in her garden until my mother came back. All of a sudden, friends came, and they came to bomb my town in Italy by ship. You would hear on top of my house the noise, you know. Ooh, so this lady ran into my house. I remember. I was more calm, but my sister was jumping up and down the bed. I want my mother, I want my mother. The lady's daughter came into the house and look at the idea. The noise was so hard, she thought a bullet went in her head, you know. I couldn't be now looking back, but those were all experiences that we didn't know, you know. In the meantime, my mother was in church, beating up the priest, because the priest locked the door. And he said, nobody's going out. My mother says, I got to go home. We didn't live too far from the church. I got to go home. My children are home alone. And the priest said, no, you cannot go out because you can get killed in the street with all this bull and bomb going around, you know. And my dad was working on a place as like a private police near a refinery. And they were going to bomb the refinery, so my mother even had the war, you know. So thank God when my mother come home, we were safe, but then when we went into town, then you can see all the damage that was done. thank God by December, France give up, was finished. And in the meantime, my dad, I think, was 50 or 51 years old. He got a letter to go in the army. He was called to go in the army. So I remember we were at the table and my mother opened the mail. We were having our meal and my mother started to cry. So my father went in the army, and at the time the war started, there wasn't much transportation with the mail, so we didn't know even where it was. So I was so worried for my dad, I remember, because my dad was really a good dad, you know, like if I wanted something, I remember the story of the umbrella. It came out a style, a sort of umbrella, but I was young. I was 9 years old, 8 years old, you know. And I would tell my dad, my mother, Mama, my girl got an umbrella. It's so cute, I want that umbrella. My mother would say to me, you need the umbrella? Look at the umbrella older, and look at my umbrella we got. You don't need the umbrella. So I would say, I'll go to my dad. Babbo, that means dad. My girlfriend got such a cute umbrella. Oh, così bellino, Babbo, I would like to have one, you know. And he would say, what store? So my mother couldn't hear, what store the umbrella? What store the umbrella is? I said, touch a store. I said, okay, then when I come out of work, I'll come and pick you up and we're going to go buy the umbrella. So we would go, when I come back home with the umbrella, my mother said, see, you always give in, you know. But see, I learned the trick from my mother, because I remember my mother one time, she came home and she had seen a coat with a fur in a window, and it was 500 lire. Right now it would be 50 cents. But on those days, it was expensive. So she came home and she says, see, you learn tactic from your own family. And she says, Umberto, the certain store got such a beautiful coat in the window with the fur over here. Oh, è così bello. And that's all she said. The following week, she picked maybe the right day, the right mood. She would say, Umberto, that coat is still in the window. Oh, and I even think it's my size. It's so beautiful. You know, this winter is kind of cold, you know. The third week, Umberto, I'm really in love with the coat. He said, Rina, do you really like the coat? Here's 500 lire. It will be 50 cents now. She went and bought the coat. And she was so happy. And you know, now look, from the war I went to this. Because my mother, I learned from her. I never saw an argument in my house when I grew up. Never. The most I remember her see, ma Umberto, his name was Umberto, ma Umberto, always say Umberto, and she never said nothing. Like she never said, you're wrong, you're right. Ma Umberto, and that was it. Explain. Now, let's go back to that. So, after that, that was the time the friends came, okay? And it was December. All of a sudden, I think in 1941, America came into the war. I don't remember if it was December or January. So they told us, in the meantime, everybody had a ration for food. Like each one could get a piece of bread like this, for the whole day. I remember by 10 o'clock, I'd eaten my bread, my father's bread, and my mother's bread. Because they said, Mama, ho fame, I'm hungry. She would give me her bread, okay? Everything was rationed. So that, let's see, they start saying now through the radio, whenever there'll be bombing, we go announce through a siren. Whenever you hear a siren, the siren going to be on about 15 minutes before the actually plane coming and bombing, you know. So the first time they came and bombed, the siren came. So we prepare ourselves now. When the siren come, you get this, something to take along in case the house, you know. So I remember, I said, okay, we're going to walk real slow. The first time the sirens came, we started to run, so panicky, get back, and go toward the countryside, because you figure they don't bomb, you know. And I remember that time, the plane came, but they were far from us. We heard the bombing, but it wasn't really close, you know. And so, I mean, everybody was crying. But the only thing I would react whenever there was bombing, I would shake. You know, I would go like this. I really scared I would be, you know. Well, that was nothing compared to what came after. Then, later on, after the first bombing, the plane would come and the siren never rang. you give formation of plane, and you start count like 10, 15, 30 plane coming. And so you had to hide because those planes were the one they call catch, that they came low, and they go like this to you, no, with a mitragliatrice, some kind of a special rifle, and they would shoot the people on the street, so you had to hide, you know. You don't know what we went through because they were day and night. My town had 1,000 bombs they came to. In the meantime, the Italian government had told the people to give, the women to give up all their wedding band, to give out, because the government needed gold, the government, for the war. My mother was smart enough, she gave a fake one, and she hid, because my mother was smart, you know, and she gave a fake one that. Then the men were supposed to give all the rifle, the hunting rifle, and my father, being the maresciallo, he was the first one to give in, to give his rifle on a bench. But my mother, because had access to the place where my father, caserma, is called, was working, because we had a private apartment for us upstairs. But my father never let us live upstairs because he had 2 daughters. Even as young, he always had a private home, like for us, you know. So my mother went, got his rifle back and bring it in because it was his favorite rifle, of which when the war was ended, my mother buried the rifle, you know. One day my mother told my dad, oh, you know, I got a surprise for you, I got a present for you. That was the only day that I thought my father was